Interdisciplinary and cross-cultural value principles for legal English teaching. Virtual presentation for the Second Asian Conference on Education, Osaka, Japan, December 2nd to the 5th, 2010. Presented by Christian Prinzler, and I'm affiliated to Yonsei University in Seoul, South Korea. As introduction, I will contextualize legal English within the ESP taxonomy. Next, I will discuss the research paucity in the field as motivation for this paper and its interdisciplinary approach. Thirdly, the interdisciplinary foundations of the paper are discussed, namely legal perspectives, linguistic theory, and pedagogy. Section 4 provides a synthesis of the different perspectives, and Section 5 concludes the presentation. Where does legal English fit in the ESP taxonomy? Johns and Price Machado distinguish English for academic purposes and English for occupational purposes as the two branches of ESP. Because of its academic focus, English for academic legal purposes resorts under English for academic purposes. On the other hand, English for occupational purposes leads the way to English for professional purposes that includes English for legal purposes, which focuses more on the needs of legal practice. In essence, legal English, as used in this presentation, is shared by English for academic purposes and English for legal purposes. There are 4 possible reasons for the research paucity. The lack of research in the field could be attributed to the level of specialization that legal English requires in its teaching and learning. Legal English is usually taught by EAP instructors who have not necessarily received formal legal training. Conversely, legal educators do not necessarily have the required language teaching expertise. 2. The interdisciplinarity of the field could deter researchers. Ties to certain academic institutions or disciplines often encourage disciplinary specialization, which discourages entry into the multidisciplinarity of legal English. 3. Candlin, Bhatia, and Jensen identify the isolation in which professional genres have been researched without consideration of professional practice. An isolated view of genre undermines the interdiscursivity between professional genres and their practices. 4. Legal language is notorious for its impenetrability because of its prolixity, formalism, nominalizations, high incidence of prepositional chunks, and fixed verbal chunks. These qualities of legal language prevent outsiders from entering the discipline. What are the reasons for frail communication skills? 1. Law students enter university education with limited academic communication skills. Bach declares that American freshmen have never arrived at college with impressive writing skills. This lack of efficient communication skills could be attributed to the evolution of secondary education that systematically eradicates grammar teaching. 2. Students commence demanding legal studies ill-informed of the extent of the academic skills required. Being ill-informed means that students have a limited context to accommodate the expectations of legal language classes. Thirdly, the increase of sophisticated economies and rapid population growth are culpable of crowded classrooms. And as a result of global migration, student bodies are becoming increasingly diverse. The diversity extends beyond nationality and disciplines. It includes diversity in linguistic, educational, and academic backgrounds, all of which could impair communication. Finally, it is also argued that legal English curricula are not entirely successful or appropriate in transferring the necessary academic and professional discourse abilities. Students might be able to manage the textual features of some professional genres. However, they are still unaware of the discursive realities of the professional world. How could the research paucity and frail communication skills of students be addressed? First, Studies that attempt to investigate the research paucity on legal English suggest that possible solutions could be found in an interdisciplinary approach that triangulates the acquisition of legal language skills with applied linguistics and pedagogy. Such triangulation is seen in the research of Bhatia. Bhatia proposes that academia and professional practice could complement each other by considering the text external factors of the production and distribution of knowledge. Bhatia acknowledges the foundational connection that exists between theory and practice through a process called interdiscursivity. Thirdly, similarly, in his PhD thesis, Hafner recognizes the necessity to cross disciplines to address the problems of legal language education. Through a qualitative interpretive research method, Hafner investigates the design, implementation, and evaluation of online courses for professional legal communication. Hafner triangulates qualitative data with genre and literacy theory, thereby employing a mixed methodology. Finally, in the context of English for academic purposes, Carstens describes the use of a multi-directional model for tertiary level disciplinary writing. A top-down directionality refers to the curriculum designer that uses a set of design principles that are based on the practice and observed verification. A bottom-up perspective provides the teacher and learner with a critical autonomy to employ the design principles as needed. A sideways orientation promotes authenticity, increases student motivation, and stimulates interdepartmental collaboration. The legal perspective considered is Ronald Dworkin's natural law philosophy. I can only brush up on a few relevant aspects of this extensive philosophy. Dworkin views law as a social practice which should be improved through its moral interpretation. Law as integrity asks judges to assume, as far as this is possible, that the law is structured by a coherent set of principles about justice and fairness and procedural due process, and it asks them to enforce these in fresh cases that come before them, so that each person's situation is fair and just according to the same standards. Dworkin proposes constructive interpretation that could transcend meta-narrative hegemony. Constructive interpretation relies on two metaphors. First, the chain novel metaphor. In this enterprise, a group of novelists write a novel seriatim. Each novelist in the chain interprets the chapters he or she has been given in order to write a new chapter, which is then added to what the next novelist receives, and so on. Each has the job of writing his or her chapter so as to make the novel being constructed the best it can be, and the complexity of this task models the complexity of deciding a hard case under law as integrity. The fictitious Judge Hercules is a metaphorical and metaphysical judge that has the ability to consider the entire corpus of law when he or she adjudicates a case. The impossibility of such a task implies that the correct interpretation would always elude us. Van Blerk criticizes the Hercules metaphor because, regardless of his or her vast legal database, he or she could still impose a politically motivated interpretation. Within applied linguistics, systemic functional linguistics explains how language functions. Systemic functional linguistics considers language as a system of linguistic choices. Each choice produces variations in meaning. Or, in an adapted Haladanian metaphor, language could be viewed as a city plan or system where traffic or meaning could reach similar or different destinations through various routes or syntactic and lexical choices. According to systemic functional linguistics, language should also be recognized as text with social purpose. Language has to be understood within its broad cultural and situational contexts. The cultural contexts refer to the purposes, values, and shared experiences of culturally situated language users. The context of culture would therefore determine the nature or genre of the text. Contexts of situation, for example the particularities of the city, like streets and the inhabitants, refer to extra-linguistic variables such as vocabulary and grammatical models that decide the linguistic organization of the text.